It's about to get interesting, so subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the top content.
I disappeared. Not literally. Of course, I didn't vanish into thin air. I didn't leave behind a trail of secrets or mysteries. I just walked away, gone so that no one would ever find me again. Not her, not anyone who could connect me to the past. That was 18 years ago. 18 years that I lived in the shadows, away from everything that had once been my life. Back then, the day I made my decision, I didn't think about what would happen next. I only thought about how to survive, how to keep myself alive. She betrayed me, and it wasn't just a betrayal, it was the destruction of everything I believed in. We were young, full of hope, and we had a son, a little boy who looked at me with the same eyes that I had once looked at his father. But she ruined that. She ruined us. I remember standing on the doorstep of our house that last night. I was holding a bag with all the things I had packed. She yelled something after me, but I couldn't hear. I didn't want to hear. Her words didn't matter to me anymore. I got out, got in my car and drove away. Where to? I didn't know. I just drove until I was on the other side of the country, in a small town where nobody knew me, where I could make a fresh start. The first few years were the hardest. I changed my name, found a job that didn't require papers, and lived in a tiny room above the garage. I didn't let myself think about the past, about him, about our son. But at night, when I was alone, the memories would come over me in a wave. I saw his face, his smile, his little hands reaching for me. I felt my heart break with pain, but I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't be the person I used to be. Years went by. I started a new life. I found a job I liked. I bought a small house on the outskirts of town. I even got a dog, but I never allowed myself to get close to people. I was afraid someone would find out the truth, that someone would connect me to the person I used to be. I lived in fear, but it was my choice, and I accepted it. But the past always finds you, even when you think you're hiding from it. One day, 18 years later, I received a letter. It was addressed to my old name, the name I hadn't heard in almost 2 decades. I opened the envelope with trembling hands and began to read. It was from him, from my son. He wrote that he'd been looking for me all these years, that he couldn't understand why I had disappeared, why I had left him. He wrote that his mother never told him the truth, that she always said I had just left and wanted nothing to do with him. But he didn't believe her. He felt that something was wrong, and now that he was an adult, he decided to find me, to find out the truth. I sat at the table, letter in hand, and felt the world crumble around me. All these years, I thought I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting him, shielding him from the pain she'd caused me. But now I realized I was wrong. I wasn't protecting him. I had abandoned him, and now he was looking for me to understand why. I didn't know what to do, answer him, face him, or continue to hide like I had done all these years. I sat and stared at the letter, feeling tears roll into my eyes. I hadn't cried in years, but now I couldn't hold back. I decided to write to him. I didn't know what I would say, but I knew I had to say something. I picked up a pen and started writing. I told him everything, about how his mother had betrayed me, how I couldn't be there for her anymore, how I thought leaving was the only way to keep myself. I wrote that I never wanted to leave him, that I always loved him, even if I couldn't be there for him. I sent the letter and waited. I waited for him to answer. I waited for him to understand, but there was no answer. Days turned into weeks, and I just sat there waiting. I began to think that maybe he didn't want to see me, that maybe I was too late, that I had lost him forever. But one day, when I got home after work, I saw him. He was standing outside my house, just like me at his age. We looked at each other, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. He walked up to me, and I saw in his eyes what I had been searching for all these years: understanding, forgiveness. We didn't speak. We just stood there looking at each other, and in that moment, I realized that the past will never let us go, but we can accept it. We can live with it, and maybe even find some good in it. He stayed for a few days. We talked about a lot of things, about his life, about my life, about what was and what could have been. And even though I knew we could never get back the lost years, I felt like we had found something else, something important. When he was leaving, he hugged me and told me he loved me, and I realized that was all I needed to hear. I had been living in the shadows all these years, but now I felt like I could step into the light, because I knew he was there, and that he had forgiven me. As I watched his car disappear over the horizon, I felt something inside me change. I was no longer the person who was running from the past. I was someone who embraced it, and that was my freedom. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, staring at the empty road. My mind was spinning with thoughts I couldn't stop. 18 years I'd lived in the belief that my disappearance was the right decision. But now, after meeting him, I realized I was wrong. I hadn't just walked away, I'd left him behind, and it was the hardest realization of all. I spent the first few days after his departure in a kind of daze. I went to work, did my chores, but inside me everything turned upside down. I began to remember the years we had lost, his first steps, his first day of school, his teenage years. It all went by without me, and I couldn't get it back, never. But I also realized that now I had a chance to be a part of his life, even if I was too late. I started texting him, short messages at first, then longer letters. I told him about my life, about how I had been living all these years. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, his words were filled with warmth. He told me that he understood me, that he held no grudges, and it was like a breath of fresh air for me. One day, he wrote that he wanted to come again, this time with his family. He had a wife and 2 children, my grandchildren. I couldn't believe it. My grandchildren, my son's children. I felt my heart begin to beat more frequently as I read his words. I agreed. Of course, how could I say no? They arrived a month later. I remember standing on the porch and watching their car pull up to the house. My hands were shaking, and I felt a lump come up in my throat. As he got out of the car and helped his wife and kids out, I saw them looking at me. His wife was smiling and the kids were watching with curiosity. They were so small, so defenseless, and they were a part of me. We spent a few days together. I showed them the city, took them to the park, told them stories from my life. The kids laughed, asked questions, and I felt something inside me come alive. I was a father again, a grandfather, part of the family. But the past was still making itself felt. One evening, when the kids were already asleep, he and I sat on the veranda and talked about what had happened. He asked me why I didn't fight for him, why I didn't take him with me. I didn't know what to answer. I said that I thought I was doing the right thing, that I wanted to protect him from the pain I was feeling myself, but now I realized I was wrong. He listened in silence, and then he said he forgave me, that he understood that I was broken, that I didn't know what to do, and that now he just wanted us to be together, that we could make up for lost time. As they drove away, I stood and watched their car disappear over the horizon, but this time I didn't feel empty. I felt hope that we could build something new, that we could be a family, even after all these years. I went back into the house and sat her down on the couch. The dog came over to me and laid her head in my lap. I stroked her, thinking about how things had changed. I was no longer the man who lived in fear and loneliness. I was a grandfather, a father, a man with a family. I knew there was more work to be done, that we would need time to get used to each other, to build a relationship, but I was ready for that, because now I had a reason to live, a reason worth fighting for. I picked up my phone and texted him, a simple, "Thanks for finding me." He replied almost immediately, "Thanks for letting me find you." And in that moment, I realized that the past no longer had power over me, that I could move on, with him, with his family, with hope for the future, and that was all I needed. After they left, I felt as if something inside me had finally shifted. I was no longer the person who lived in the shadows, hiding from the past. I had a family now, not the one I'd once envisioned, but a real one, and I was willing to do whatever it took to keep it. We started talking more often. We called each other, texted each other, sometimes even had video calls so I could see my grandchildren. They were growing up so fast, and I tried not to miss any of the important moments. First words, first steps, first days of school. I wanted to be a part of it all, even if at a distance. One day he caught me and told me they wanted to come again, this time for a long time. His wife had gotten a job in my town, and they had decided to move closer to me. I couldn't believe my ears. They wanted to live near me. Me, the man who had once abandoned them. When they arrived, I helped them find a house. It wasn't far from mine, and I felt like life had given me a second chance. We spent almost every day together. I picked the kids up from school, played with them at the park, read them stories before bed. I felt like I was making up for all the years we had lost. But the past was still making itself felt. Sometimes when I looked at him, I could see in his eyes a shadow of the pain he had endured. He never talked about it directly, but I could sense that somewhere deep inside, he was still wondering why. Why did I leave? Why didn't I fight? One evening, as we Saturday on the veranda drinking coffee, he brought it up. He said that all these years he had felt abandoned, that he couldn't understand why I hadn't taken him with me, why I hadn't tried to be a part of his life. I listened to him, feeling my heart clench with pain. I knew I had to tell the truth, the whole truth. I told him how broken I was, how I saw no way out, how I thought leaving was the only way to keep myself. I told him I never stopped loving him, even if I couldn't be there for him. He listened in silence and then said he understood, that he couldn't justify what I did, but he could forgive. And that was enough. It was more than enough for me. Since then, our relationship has grown even stronger. We started talking about what was, what could have been, and what will be. We made plans for the future, dreamed about how we would spend our time together, and I felt like I finally found what I'd been looking for all these years, a family, a home. But life, as always, had a surprise in store for me. One day, as I was picking up the kids from school, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was so intense that I could hardly breathe. I tried to hide it from the children, but they immediately noticed that something was wrong. They caught him and he came to get me. We went to the hospital where the doctors said I had a heart attack. I was in shock. I had always considered myself healthy, strong, but now I was lying in a hospital bed, feeling like life was slipping away from me. He had been by my side the whole time. He held my hand, told me everything would be okay, and I believed him, because now I had a reason to fight, a reason to live. When I was released from the hospital, I realized that life was too short to waste on regrets. I decided that I would live each day as if it were my last. I spent more time with my family, savoring every moment we spent together, and I felt like I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all these years, happiness. Now, when I look at my grandchildren, I see a future in their eyes, a future that I can help build, a future where they will know that their grandfather was always there for them. And that's all I need, because now I know that the most important thing in life is family, and I'm grateful that I have the chance to be a part of their lives. After the hospital, my life changed. I began to appreciate more every moment, every minute spent with my family. The doctors told me that I needed to take care of myself, to take care of my health, but I knew that the most important thing was not to waste the time I had, time that I had lost once, and now I was trying to make up for it. He and I became even closer. He often came to me to talk to me, to share his thoughts and plans. Sometimes we would just sit in silence, enjoying the moment. I could feel something new growing between us, not just a father-son bond, but something more, a trust, understanding, a love that has gone through adversity and has only grown stronger. My grandchildren were a source of joy to me. They were so bright, so alive. I taught them what I knew myself, how to fish, how to build a fire, how to find beauty in simple things. They listened to me with wide open eyes, and I felt as if I were giving them a piece of myself, a piece of what I had once lost. But the past still sometimes reminded me of itself. One evening, as he and I Saturday on the veranda, he asked me about her, about his mother. I hadn't expected this question, and it caught me off guard. I was silent for a long time, not knowing what to say, but then I decided he deserved the truth, the whole truth. I told him how we met, how we fell in love, how we started a family, and how it all fell apart. I didn't make excuses for her, but I didn't blame her. I was just talking about what happened, about the pain I felt, about how I couldn't deal with it. He listened in silence, and then he said he understood, that he couldn't judge us because he hadn't been in our shoes, and that was like a breath of fresh air for me. Since then, we haven't talked about her anymore. We focused on what we have now, our family, our future, and I felt like I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all these years. Peace, happiness, a home. But life, as always, is full of surprises. One day, when I was playing with my grandchildren in the park, I saw her. She was standing in the distance, looking at us. I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked older, but I recognized her immediately. My wife, his mother? I felt my heart start to beat faster. I didn't know what to do. Approach her, ignore her, but she made the first move. She came up to me and said she wanted to see him. To see us. She said she'd been thinking about us all these years, that she was sorry for what had happened. But I couldn't answer. I just stood there looking at her, feeling as if time had stopped. He walked over to us when he saw her. They stood before each other, mother and son, separated by years of pain and misunderstanding. I could see him struggling with his emotions, trying to find words, but there were none. They just stood there looking at each other, as if trying to figure out what to do next. She said she wanted to talk to him, to me, to everyone, and I realized this was the moment that could change everything. We went to my house, Saturday down at the table, and started talking about what was, what could have been, and what will be. It was hard, it hurt, but it was necessary. She said she was sorry, that she understood, that she had destroyed our family, that she had hurt us. She said she'd lived with guilt all these years, that she tried to find us but didn't know how, and now that she has found us, she wants to apologize. He listened to her, and then he said he forgives her, that he couldn't forget, but he could let go, and it was like a breath of fresh air to her. She cried, and he hugged her, and in that moment, I realized that the past no longer has power over us, that we could move on, together. Now when I look at them, I see them building a new relationship, a relationship based on understanding and forgiveness, and I feel like I finally found what I've been looking for all these years: peace, family, love. I know there's a lot of work to be done, that we need time to get used to each other, to build something new, but I'm ready for it, because now I have everything I need: a family, a home, a future, and that's all that matters.